Okay, biomechanics and cardio exercise. Usually what we mean by cardio exercise is just exercise that involves a lot of jumping, puffing, and puffing, right? But if we are trying to get better at it, usually we ask questions like, how can we get faster, right? Is it a recent question that was asked, is it humanly possible to run a marathon under 2 hours? And this was like a huge public event, and the person who tried it ended up uh, finishing a full marathon in under 2 hours. And at this point, I'd like you to, if it helps, just jump up and down and try to figure out how quickly can you jump up and down in a second. And we'll look at the world record. Thank you so much for participating. So the answers could range anywhere from, I don't know, 1 a second to maybe 8 a second is top. But in general, it's less than that. So just to show you that this gets, immediately give me a thumbs down if you don't hear the audio from this video.
预备，跳！
明显快，他快，他快，小林快。
You know, there's audience, there's live commentary, but I'm not going to put you through the whole video, but I know you're dying to know who won and how quickly people can move around. So it happens to be 960 turns in about 160 seconds. So I roughly looked at it in the YouTube video how long it took, and it's about 166 milliseconds a turn, right? So that's the fastest somebody can go. Yeah, I know. I saw all of you jumping with 2 feet. Now I have a question for you. So jump around again and try to answer this question. What happens if you try to jump faster? So jump slowly and then try to jump much faster. And then what happens when you do that? And when you get a feel for it, answer. Hopefully you can select more than one. I hope I didn't mess that up. Thumbs down if you're not able to select more than one option and you intend to. All right, we have some answers. Let's see what people said. Okay, so the winner by far is my muscles get shorter as when I go faster, right? So we're going to see if this is true or not. We have the tools to actually look at this. So you're going to know by the end of this session which of these answers was right. Many people agree that muscles work harder and they tone up more, sure, relax more. Not many people say they relax more, but very few people say that they get longer. Okay, so let me recall the session description. Biological movement is incredibly efficient. Efficient storage and retrieval of elastic energy by elastic tissues in the body is a key reason for efficient movement. Now, there are a lot of words that I think are worth talking about a little bit. I've highlighted them. What is biomechanics? What does it mean by what does efficient movement mean? If I move efficiently, can I go faster? What is elastic energy? What are elastic tissues? What is motion capture? So on and so forth. So let's start with that. This is a definition that I personally like. Biomechanics is the science of movement in a living body, including how muscles, bones, tendons, and ligaments work together to produce movement. The together part is important in my opinion, and in a reductionistic approach, it might not get as much attention, and this is what we'll focus on today, because when you jump or when you run, you have to think about your entire body. So I'm going to show you a video and just watch it without me biasing you what it is. So if you don't know who this person is, this is Floyd Mayweather. He is a now retired professional boxer, and he has an uncanny rate of getting through an incredible number of punches into his opponent. So highly trained artists produce elegant and efficient movements. Now, appreciating this quality in movement is not limited to any particular field of movement. Hopefully it comes through, at least. Yeah, even if we don't know what it is about the picture in the right, we find more appealing, or at least I find more appealing. We can somehow tell even if we are not trained. So I'm going to show you this video one more time and think about some words you would use to describe this movement. Okay, it's poll time. How would you describe this movement? Use any words that come to your mind. You can submit multiple entries. All right, let's see what people said. Relaxed. Uh-huh. So in the previous poll, if you remember, when we go faster, we said not many people said muscles get more relaxed. But think about all of these things as we keep talking about these ideas. Graceful, easy, fluid, elegant. Yeah, I agree with all of these things. But the interesting question is, how can we learn something about our own bodies which will enable us to get better at some aspects of these? All right, let's talk about. So we were, if you recall, before the poll, we were talking about different concepts. All the concepts that I'm going to talk about, I've highlighted on the left. These are the terms we are trying to a little bit more clearly define in our own heads. And so elastic tissues, they refer to muscles, tendons, ligaments, and connective tissue in our body. They have elastic properties similar to springs. So something like this. If you have a resistance band, you can stretch it around, and then it will exert a force in the opposite direction. But when you collapse, it won't push back. Right? Unlike springs, they can't push out when compressed. This is true for our elastic tissues too. So like springs, they can exert a pull force when stretched, or more accurately, like a rubber band. So muscles can exert pull forces. The muscles are special because we can control them with neural input from our nervous system. but they can also exert forces without neural input across any joint when they are stretched. So if this string or rubber band, when I increase the length and hold it there, without the nervous system having to be active, it can exert a pull force back. So that's the point I'm trying to make. So think about them more as rubber bands than springs, is the first thing I would say. And what is elastic energy? Right, so these are a couple of images that come up if I Google image search elastic energy. So in this resistance band, if I increase the length, then there is more energy, meaning it will, if I let go, it will snap back faster. So on. Or if I use a thinner band, for the same amount of stretch, I have to exert less effort to keep it there. So it's storing less energy. So how much energy can be stored depends on the length and the tissue itself. We're going to talk about this length a lot during this session. So elastic energy is not the only type of energy we're interested in. Kinetic energy. So when we go faster, we have more kinetic energy, so to speak. So here is a video of me jumping rope and doing motion capture. And this is an example of what a typical session might look like. So let me walk you through what you're seeing. If you focus on the green wall, squiggly line in the bottom, you see it going up and down. That is the position of my big toe, meaning if I am here, if you focus on the position of the vertical line, I seem to not have control over this, but when I'm up here, I am at the highest point of the jump, and when I am down here, I am at the lowest point of my jump, meaning I have just touched down on the ground and I'm taking off again over here. So in terms of elastic energy, we'll see where there is a lot of elastic energy stored in the body. But in terms of kinetic energy, we have the most kinetic energy at this point when we are just about to hit the floor, right? It's all that impact. Most often we think about it as having to get absorbed from our knees and throughout our body. But we'll talk about a more useful purpose of that kinetic energy. Can we repurpose it and control it and reuse it? And how do we do that? That's what we'll talk about in this course. So here, now we talked about each different concept. Now I'm going to talk about the relationships between these concepts, right? So elastic tissues store elastic energy, and we can retrieve them at a desired time point, right? Using our nervous system, or they automatically get retrieved mechanically. Here is an example of me monitoring the length of a muscle. I told you that the length, the longer a muscle is, the more elastic energy it stores, the passive part. So here's an example of me just turning, and you can see that the length of the muscle changes as I turn. More importantly, it's at its highest point somewhere here. And then I start turning, right? So if we are able to store more elastic energy in tissues and retrieve a greater fraction of it, maybe we can be more efficient. So elastic energy retrieval depends on the timing and precision of muscle activities, which move elastic energy between different muscle systems in the body. So different artists and athletes, they start honing in on all of these. Maybe they don't think about it that way, but this is usually what happens. So we talked about two types of energy. It's not, A third important type is the chemical energy, which is basically the food you eat gets turned into ATP, and that gets turned into you when you tense a muscle, like hold a bicep. Uh, you can exert forces, so that there you're converting chemical energy into force, right? So, but now we are going to focus on the passive properties, elastic energy and kinetic energy. So there is a sense of storing our movement, right? When we jump down, when we hit the floor, all that momentum gets stored as elastic energy, and it depends on us how much it depends on our practice and different things, how much we're able to store. And elastic energy retrieval is the process of converting elastic energy back into movement, like jumping back up. So the energy cycle in this context starts over here. At this portion where I'm touching the ground, I am starting to convert my momentum into elastic energy in my body. I haven't shown you that, but I'm just placing in time, I'm just trying to fit this concept of energy cycle into the graph that you already saw. And by the time I take off, the retrieval is completed, right? So I have stored it, retrieved it, and turned it into a useful motion. So there are different types of exercises. You can imagine jumping from left to right. You can imagine jumping down and taking a leftward step, or jumping down and taking a rightward step. So you can store it and repurpose it to do different actions. So that's the beauty of it. Okay. So one idea I would like to put forward is that world-class athletes and artists perhaps master this ability to convert between different forms of energy. And when we watch well-executed movements, like we watch Floyd Mayweather, in this sense, we are somehow able to appreciate them, right? There's some effortless movement. It's almost like it came out of nowhere. So this happens within us during everyday activities such as walking. So here I'm going to monitor the length of the same muscle in my back that I showed you as I walk, and I'm going to plot the length of the muscle in the bottom. I'm going to play it slowly now. So see if you can tell when the muscle lengthens and when the muscle shortens. I don't know if you could tell, but we're going to visit this again later. So those are everyday activities. Let's talk about some less common activities and try to compare everyday activities to less common activities. Here I'm just going to turn on one leg. So this is common in dance, something like that. And I'm going to play it slow. The point I'm trying to make is that there is some sense of me using the concept of energy cycle, meaning I am first building up energy in the muscle, right? For this case, there is no impact, meaning I'm not jumping down. I'm using other muscles to create this. And then I can retrieve it in any pattern that I desire. In this case, I want to turn. So it depends on where we store things and where we retrieve, how we retrieve energy. We can create different types of movement. So no matter what field you're in, you can use this principle. So what's the difference between my walking and me turning, right? So if you look at the y-axis on walking, it's only about a 10% change in muscle length. But if you look at the turn, it's about a 50% change. So I'm doing the same thing, except I'm doing it with different source, and I am also doing a lot more of it. So thinking about movement from the perspective of the whole, I said becomes very important because we have to move with the whole body. To give you an idea, I'm going to show you a model. So in this model, we're going to use this to talk about the concepts today and in the future classes. So our body, we talked about elastic tissues a lot, but we also have rigid elements, which are bones. And the combination of rigid and elastic elements, putting them together in a specific way, is really important. And what are some examples of how we could put them together? How do these elements work together to create efficient movement? So one example is this toy that I'm holding in my hand. I hope you can see my video. So it's just wooden dowels and elastic rubber bands, and you can squish it, right? So how it moves is, even if I put force in somewhere in one place, the entire body responds. Some move less, the others move more, so on and so forth. This is often the case with our body too, and this is a very useful model to try to understand that process. Of course, unlike our body, these bones are not touching each other, right? So that's a difference, and we'll get to that in future classes. So they have an interesting property of distributing these external forces. External forces in the case of jumping means the force on your feet soon as you hit the floor. So this principle, interestingly, gets used a lot in many different fields. It's used to build bridges. This is in Brisbane. And it's used to build sculptures. It is also used by NASA to build space robots.
We are using tensegrity structures, which are these tensile networks that are very shock absorbent, compliant, and we're using those to build robots or planetary landers that can land on another planet, absorb that impact shock, and then that very same structure is your robot that enables mobility on the planetary surface.
Okay, so let's try to understand the energy cycle from the perspective of this tensegrity sphere. This is a useful model because we are trying to distinguish between passive and active properties. Active properties is just our flexing muscles. Passive properties are just what happens to the system when we do something to it. So in this case, I'm just going to drop the ball. So before I do that, I'm going to show you how I did this. Can you all see the screen? Thumbs up if you can. See the motion capture screen? Excellent. Maybe you won't be able to hear me when I walk over there. So I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you a live demonstration of motion capture in this context. So I'm going to take this sphere. You'll see a video of me, and you should see moving points. So there we are. If you can hear me, here I can stretch it, and the points follow. I can compress it, points follow. I can move it around. I can just track the points. I can drop it on the floor. So now let's see what happens when I drop it on the floor. What happens to the length of the elastic tissues? So I know which vertices are connected by elastic bands, so I can measure the total length. So maybe that was too fast. I'm going to slow it down a little bit. It's actually slow it down a lot. So you see it goes through this little morphing phase. Goes down, it looks like it's getting squished, but the bands are getting longer. And then the band, those longer bands exert forces, and then that gets used and it springs back up. Right? It does a couple of bounces. I didn't go that far, so unfortunately you won't be able to see it, but it lands on the floor, gets pushed, and then the elastic energy is retrieved and it takes off. It's a useful idea to think about when we think about our own jumping. So note that elastic energy storage starts at touchdown, the moment it hits the floor, somewhere here. That's where it hits the floor. And then when it starts unmorphing, that's when the retrieval process starts, and it finishes when it starts taking off. Similar to the jumping. See if you can spot it. It's okay if you can't follow it with your eyes. I'll make nice graphs for you. Okay, so I was monitoring lengths of many different muscle systems in the body, right? So here I'm showing you a specific set of muscles that I'm monitoring the length of. I'm only showing you from the lower body. And then the gray line is when I hit the floor as I jump down. Right? So as soon as I hit the floor, you can see its length is increasing. But unlike the tensegrity structure, different muscles start increasing at length at different times. So this is the front of my body. You know, most people talk about the core. And here's my arms. Your arms also change length. We don't realize this, but they do. We'll talk about this a little bit more. And then here's the back. So if I line them up all together, so here it goes somewhere in the lower body, muscles start getting long. And somewhere in the front, in your core, muscles start getting long. And somewhere in the in your arm muscles start getting long. And then your back muscles start getting long, and then you take off. So unlike the tensegrity systems, not every muscle system starts storing elastic energy at the same time. Right? So that's the difference here. Now, let's relate energy cycle to speed, right? So this is the burning question we asked in the beginning of the class. So for this, I ran on a treadmill. I could just modulate the speed, right? So here's the result. So I'll walk you through it. There are a lot of squiggly lines. On the left, on the bottom are red lines. And these lines indicate the position of my foot, right? How high up in the air I am. So when it's flat and at the bottom, then I'm on the floor. And then my foot has taken off for the rest of it. So I just walked, put those markers and walked on the treadmill. And those muscles are changing length. They have a very clear rhythmic pattern. Not every step is exactly the same as the others, but there's a very clear pattern. What happens if I increase the speed? There are two things I want you to observe, especially compare walking to running. The blue line represents the length of the muscle, by the way. When I walk, the muscle oscillates slower. When I run, the muscle oscillates faster, meaning it's increasing and decreasing in length faster. So when I walk, the muscle's resting length is lower. When I run, the muscle's resting length is higher. This is as opposed to popular opinion from the poll. So take a minute to compare the mean position here in walking and mean position here in running. And the oscillation amplitude is also larger, meaning I'm storing more energy in the muscle and retrieving more energy from the muscle. So this, we all run, and this happens in all of us. So muscles tone up when we go faster. This is in direct conflict with many people's intuitions, like we just saw, toning up doesn't necessarily require, holding it like, it's not that. So a useful mental model, think about it like, think about your muscle systems like a guitar string. If you want it to produce a higher note, you're going to tune it, you're going to increase the tension in that string, and then when you pluck it, it's going to produce a higher tone. Of course, it's not the exact same physics concept, but it's a very useful mental model. So for example, if I want to produce a higher tone on the guitar, I'm going to crank up the tension. If I'm going to increase the running speed, I'm going to increase the length of my muscle. So to get a better intuition for this idea, if and when time permits, if you have a resistance bands, take them and try to oscillate them, right? Try to do it as easily as possible, and see what happens when you try to oscillate thinner versus thicker bands. Does your preferred frequency of oscillation change when you oscillate a thinner band versus a thicker band? So from this perspective, how do we apply all of these things to jumping? What does it mean to actually get better at jumping? So let's look at a YouTube video. This is a very popular instruction video on YouTube. They recommend that we correct the so-called double jump. Let's just look at what they have to say first.
Now, a mistake that most people make when starting out that we get a lot of feedback about is they do 2 jumps, as you see here, for every time the rope swings.
Thumbs down if you couldn't hear the volume, if you couldn't hear anything. Thumbs up if you could hear. Okay, thank you.
Now, a mistake that most people make when starting out that we get a lot of feedback about is they do 2 jumps, as you see here, for every time the rope swings around. I want you guys to get rid of this mentality and start. It's the easier way to jump rope, but it's not the correct way. And if you start off doing that, it's going to be a lot harder to get yourself into just doing 1 skip for every rope turn. Okay, so what I want you guys to do is start off by just hopping 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and get that consistent rhythm down and get used to counting, and then envision the rope spinning 1 time underneath you every time you do that.
Okay, so in this video, you got an idea for something apparently beginners mistake, as it's labeled, that they make when jumping rope. So I saw this instruction video and I started relearning how to jump rope. I hadn't done it in years. And by the time I had already corrected it out before I recorded. So I'm going to show you a recording from Yue, who bravely volunteered to demonstrate a jumping rope. So here's Yue, and I am looking at the muscle lengths in her arms and her legs. And you see that the green line is a little bit different. So let's try to look at the video more closely. So I'm going to slow it down for you. Let's contrast this with a single jump, the same video that you've been seeing. Hopefully, depending on the things you saw, you have an intuition for what might be happening, or maybe not. For me, definitely, it wasn't obvious from the video itself. So the instruction video that you watched It explains the problem. It says double jump is the problem, and it presents a solution to overcome the problem, which is visualization, right? Visualize how you jump. What it does not tell you is it does not tell you why the double jump requires correction. So I want to hear from you. Why do you think the double jump requires correction? It's poll time. I like that does not require a correction. What if I chose to do this? We'll talk about this. If you definitely want, if you want to jump faster, of course, it's going to get in your way. But if that's not your goal, if you want to jump slower, and if you're doing it unconsciously, not deliberately, there might be an issue. And we'll talk about that. Great. Thank you so much for all the answers. Yes, more work related to efficiency. But the efficiency is more like the second jump is wasting energy. I hope that's in that you meant it in that sense. But it's not clear how the energy efficiency works, perhaps to some people, including to me before I made these drafts. How does efficiency play in the context of one jump? So what I'm going to show you is the length of the arms, the muscle line that I've highlighted in blue, the system of muscles that I've highlighted in blue. And I'm going to use these markers to measure to track the length at high speed using the motion capture system. What you're going to see, there are two lines. I'm going to walk you through the graph. The blue line represents the up and down position, meaning if the blue line is down close to 0, it means that we have hit the floor. And the red line represents the length of the muscle. So here you're seeing what happens during a double jump. Remember that when we touch down, we usually store energy in our body, right? So that would be a nice thing to do instead of just dissipating it out. So storing energy is correlated with increasing in muscle length. But here the muscle length is decreasing. But after the second jump, it starts increasing. It's almost as if one jump is for turning the rope and the second little jump is actually to create the jump. So in this case, where there is only one jump per turn of rope, you see that once I touch down, I start collecting energy, including in my arms. It doesn't change length by a lot, right? It's just a 3 centimeters across the whole thing. But it's very rhythmical. So if I compare these two traces directly, what you notice is that the rate at which we are taking off from the floor is almost exactly the same. But the number of turns we are producing with a double jump is almost exactly half. So you are going through the same number of energy cycles, but not getting enough turns of rope. So the key difference is what happens when we touch down. Soon as we land, in one case, I'm collecting the energy in my body. In another case, it is being used to keep turning the rope. And therefore, we have to go through another energy cycle to start collecting energy in our arms and push off. You will hear a lot of descriptions about if you're trying to do something more intense, like backflips and gymnastics or something like that, you use your arms a lot. So this is how they fit in. So Does that mean that it is not possible to be efficient with a double jump? It does not. If you deliberately do this and decide to do a double jump, you can still achieve elastic energy storage and retrieval. You can just do a big jump, a small jump, a big jump, a small jump. It's just you're adding rhythm to it. It's then there you have control. But to give you an intuition of what happens here, think about what happens if you hear a loud noise or suddenly get afraid. So it tense up, right? So that's what happens most commonly when we hit the floor, but it to a much lesser extent, so we are not aware of it. Okay, so muscles, if incorrectly engaged during elastic energy storage, can impede the process of storage. So we often compensate this with exerting more muscular force to accomplish the task at hand. This is, I feel like, a popular thing I see in fitness is bigger muscles, more muscle mass, and how do I eat right to do that, etc., etc. So another parameter you could work at, instead of being able to generate bigger forces, is just to manipulate the forces that are there and read them and direct them more efficiently. So the alternate perspective that you see here more maybe in the context of meditation or breathing or something like that is let it happen. The it is referring to the process of elastic energy storage, meaning the phase in which the muscles are lengthening, let them happen. There is nothing for you to do. Just remove interferences, right? So that could be a takeaway based on the data that you saw. So I have a question now. How does this session change or enhance how you think about movement? Whole time. Maybe it doesn't change anything, or maybe you're more confused. It doesn't matter. I just want to hear from you. Oops, didn't mean to do that. Okay, as we get more responses, let's have a look at some of these. Let's comment on a couple of these. Yes, look closer. It may not be intuitive. This is a very good observation. Our intuitions are often wrong, and they come from things we hear or things we think we see. When we have sensitive instruments precisely doing the observation for us, and as long as we design our experiments to or decide exactly what we want to observe, they can really aid us and aid our intuitions. Stretching and being more relaxed, yes, but definitely in the context, the timing is very important. I lost my mouse. Okay. I am happy that some of this has been something new for some of you. Yes, work smarter, not harder. Optimize, another way to think about it is optimize throughout the body. Just because we are jumping, it doesn't mean that I need to do more. If I'm switching to running, it doesn't mean that I need to do more leg days. Be more aware that your entire body is working. It is still unclear. I haven't really said how we work on this. We'll talk about this in future sessions. So here's an example of how we typically think about movement. Give me a thumbs down if you don't hear audio.
Earlier this month, Eliud Kipchoge became the first person to run a marathon in under 2 hours. Absolutely incredible. I can't even imagine running a mile at the pace that he runs a full marathon. Now, in this video, I want to look at 5 things that we can all learn from looking at his running form to help us all become better runners. So the first thing I want to focus on is Kipchoge's foot strike. We're going to take a look and see how his foot comes and strikes the ground. We can see that as his foot meets the ground, he's landing with the balls of his feet, but doing so with a light midfoot strike, rather than landing right up in more of a kind of a forefoot striking position, running on his toes, as we'd expect to see from a sprinter perhaps. Landing with a midfoot strike here allows him to keep contact time nice and short, keep the limb stiffness, which is something we'll talk about a little bit later, nice and firm, so that he actually manages to maximize the elastic return off the ground with each stride. We can see as we come.
Okay, what this person is referring to is how the foot strikes the floor. So let's compare it to his fellow runner who was he was a pacer in this a landmark event actually. They are touching the floor, they are touching the ground with their shoes very differently, and this person's record is 2 hours 5 minutes. It's not like they are doing a bad job at all, right? So most of my treadmill doesn't go as fast, just to give you an idea of how fast of the average speed they kept for the whole marathon. So my point is, in many explanations that you hear explanations about keep your elbows in, keep your elbows out, crunch your butt as you run, so you have more balance, whatever it is. They mostly relate to position of things in space or constant state of muscles. The two things that I hope you can take away from this presentation is that you can be efficient no matter what position, whether you do a midfoot strike or a heel strike. And you should also think about oscillation. Not many things in your body remain constant through time. So bring that rhythm through every part of your body, and dancers love to do this. So here is another description that follows along the same lines. It's from the same video that you saw, instruction video that you saw earlier.
As you can see here, as I'm just doing regular bounce, I'm up on my toes, my feet are not coming more than an inch or two off the ground, my knees are bent slightly, cushioning my impact so my joints don't get hurt, my elbows are in, and my hands are jutting out to the sides of my hips, and my wrists are controlling everything. Now,
so as you see, most of the description is about where to put different things in the body, but the point is how you put them there matters a lot more than where you put them, and depends on the individual, right? So I have another question for you. I'm going to ask you to see this video of Floyd Mayweather again, see if you can spot something more interesting, see if your intuitions. Okay, so does this session change at all how you see this video of Floyd Mayweather? Let's talk about the yes and no at the end. Okay. Yes. Respect for Mayweather. So let's take these yes and no. I think they nicely summarize how I feel about watching this video before and after I learned these concepts. For me personally, it changed how I look at the video because I'm looking for different things. The no is because it doesn't necessarily mean that I can see them just because I know what to look for. So I thank you for sending those answers. Rhythm is important, yes. Yes, small jumps and timing the jumps would help in boxing. If you see analysis of one of the most debated, controversial, and legendary so-called phantom punch from Muhammad Ali, and if you see it in slow motion, you'll see it differently after this session, I guarantee you. You can see the beautiful use of his feet and the beautiful use of timing. This cannot be conscious in the sense that it's conscious when you practice slowly, but at that speed, it has to be ingrained in your body. It's just a summary feeling of what that feels like. Yes, details are important. And if you wish, if there are new intuitions, if you wish to test them, please think about letting us know. Yeah, consistency. That's also worth commenting on. So once we start huffing and puffing, let's say during a run, we tend to engage this fear response that we talked about, right? That's when we deliberately require stretching after running. But if we manage to stay in the regime of what our body is comfortable with, often it is okay. I mean, the muscles are already stretching and coming back, right? So we'll talk about this in the fourth session a lot more. I perhaps did not do a good job explaining what I meant, but we'll talk about it more later. All right. Let's do the same poll again. The poll we did at the very beginning. I think we got a few more responses to the previous poll, so I'm just going to wait a few seconds. Yeah, coming in. Okay, let's look at the results. So looks like everybody changed their mind from muscles get shorter to muscles get longer. So remember, it is important to test our intuitions, and there are many ways of doing this. I think remarkably, people who have tried to investigate movement over thousands of years ago, and they came up with different movement disciplines, you see versions of these ideas incorporated in those teachings. To me, it is so amazing that people can do that without the use of these sensitive instruments. Okay, so let's review the main mental models that hopefully we created during this session. How do rigid and elastic elements work together to create efficient movement? Think about this toy. It's the principle it employs is called tensegrity. So use that toy as a useful mental model. What is the relationship between speed and energy cycle? Think about tuning the guitar. You increase the tension in the guitar string, it'll produce a higher tone. It's similar to muscle systems. What does it mean to get better at jumping? I'll give you a mental model. Think about an energy efficient car. So someone recycle the energy from braking and to charge the battery. And in our case, we are constantly and at a very high efficiency recycling energy in our body as we walk, as we run, as we jump. If we get a better handle on how these unconsciously controlled processes work, we can bring it to the realm of incorporating it to whatever movement discipline that we practice. Okay, so how do we work with the idea of elastic energy? We'll talk about this a little bit next time. You will have Pallavi, one of a fellow postdoc at MIT, is going to lead a yoga session. So for next time, I would love it if you participate in the yoga session as well. We'll do a brief recap, go through a yoga session, and then talk about the biomechanics involved. So there were a lot of people that helped me along the way. So I do want to say thank you to them. An important person to point out is Armin, who was a dance coach who figured these out in his own body and then taught me. It took me he told me all these things in my first day 10 years ago. It took me 8 years to understand what he was saying. So it's not easy to get a handle on these things in your own internal experience. And I would, this course is sponsored by the Immersion Lab, and I thank them for making this possible. And thank you so much for attending.